Right, welcome here to Seismic Radio, and we are looking at 2 Corinthians, and we are now in chapter 6. 2 Corinthians may be one of the books that is not read that often, but it's certainly full of meat, spiritual meat to eat. And so we're gonna look at chapter 6 now. Okay, let me just read through the chapter, and then we're gonna see how far we can get. We've got about half an hour. That's the time we're gonna use for this, and we're just gonna go through it. Okay, so first of all, it says here in 2 Corinthians chapter 6 verse 1, "But working together we also call on you not to receive the grace of God in vain. For he says, in an acceptable time I heard you, and in a day of salvation I helped you. Behold, now is the accepted time, behold, now is the day of salvation. We are in nothing giving cause of stumbling, in no way, so that the ministry may not be blamed, but in everything commending ourselves as God's servants, in much patience, in troubles, in emergencies, in distress, in stripes, in imprisonments, in riots, in labors, in watchings, in fastings, in pureness, in knowledge, in long-suffering, in kindness, in the Holy Spirit, in love unfeigned, in the word of truth, in the power of God, through the weapons of righteousness on the right hand and on the left, through glory and dishonor, through evil report and good report, as deceivers and yet true, as unknown and yet well known, as dying and behold we live, as chastened and not killed, as sorrowful yet always rejoicing, as poor yet making many rich, as having nothing yet possessing all things. O Corinthians, our mouth is open to you, our heart has been enlarged, and you are not restrained in us, but you are restrained in your own affections. But for the same reward I speak as to children, you also be enlarged." Okay, that's the first part of 2 Corinthians chapter 6, verses 1 to 13. And again, when we look at the chapter divisions, since first chapter, when I was looking at this, I tried to make myself a little bit more knowledgeable. Apparently the chapter divisions in the Bible, they were done by a Jewish guy and by a Christian guy. The Christian guy, and I've forgotten his name, Leitner or something, I don't know, Langner. Anyway, the Christian guy followed the Jewish division, which was provided by the Jewish scholar, and the New Testament then was designed by him. So, and that happened in the 1200s. So that's the 13th century, and so that's a chapter division. Now the verse division came somewhat later, and I think one of the first Bibles which adopted the verse division was the Geneva Bible. And that was sort of the 1500s. Yeah. So even though I think that the verses, they came in sometime somewhat earlier, but they weren't always used. Right, the problem is that the divisions were not necessarily divinely inspired, and sometimes they separate the texts more than they should. Okay, and that's the reason why we have to go back to chapter 5. Especially when we are talking about 2 Corinthians 6 chapter 6 verse 1, "But working together we also call on you not to receive the grace of God in vain." So what was Paul talking about before? That's sometimes a problem. We need to, pull it all back together again. And Paul talks about the ministry of reconciliation. That's the headline here, which again is not in the original Bible and not in the original text. It's just been added. And I'm just going to go to the last couple of verses, and it says here from verse 18 in chapter 5, "And all things are of God, who has reconciled us to himself through Jesus Christ, and has given us the ministry of reconciliation, whereas God was in Christ reconciling the world to himself, not imputing their trespasses to them, and putting the word of reconciliation in us. Then we are ambassadors on behalf of Christ, as God exhorting through us. We beseech you on behalf of Christ, be reconciled to God. For he has made him who knew no sin to be sin for us, that we might become the righteousness of God in him." Okay, so that is chapter 5. And we can see very clearly here that Paul talks about this great grace God has given to us. And then when we go to chapter 6, let's go to chapter 6. "But working together we also call on you not to receive the grace of God in vain." And the big question is, how can you receive the grace of God in vain? We need to remind ourselves what grace means. Grace is when we receive good things undeserved. That's grace. Good things undeserved. And how can you receive it in vain? And again, he talks about this great salvation. Now, the way I would understand the scripture is a little bit like the parable with the talents. The one who's received the grace in vain is the one who didn't do anything with the talents. He just buried them, knowing that God wanted him to do something completely different. Now he is messed up completely. And I think if he had tried it, and he would have lost the talent in his attempt to multiply it, it would have been a different story, but he didn't even try. He just buried it. He just forgot about it. And I think a lot of us, they know about, a lot of people in this world, they know about Jesus Christ. They've got faith in his redemption, faith in his sacrifice on the cross. They probably are saved themselves, but they're not doing anything with it. They're sort of silent Christians. They're not engaging in seeking God and building a relationship with God, but they found this talent, or they've been given this talent, and they're literally just burying it. And I think that is when you can receive the grace in vain. It's a bit like, again, you receive good things undeserved, so you didn't work for it, or you didn't do anything, you didn't earn it. Somebody else earned it and has given it to you. And it's a bit like if your mother gives you, or your parents, they die and they give you £100,000, or $100,000 to do something with your life, to make your life a little bit easier, maybe to build your own family or whatever. And what you do is you just dump it into your bank account and you don't do anything with it. Or maybe not even that, so it doesn't even carry interest. You just, put it in your mattress and you keep it for a rainy day, but you don't do anything with it. The rainy day never comes. One day you're old, you die, and maybe people don't even know that you put it in your mattress. They take the mattress, they put it on the dump site, they burn it, and it's all gone. And that would be, receiving this money in vain. You could have used it for a good purpose. If you, got married, you had kids, you could have used it to help them, to build a life for them, to buy a house for them, to make the start in life a little bit easier, maybe make your own start in life a bit easier. You could have used it for benevolent things, for helping the disadvantaged, the hungry, the starving, those who have nothing. You could have given it away, but you didn't do anything with it. You just put it in a mattress, keeping it for a rainy day, which never came. And then one day you die, and people don't know what's in the mattress. They just think, this is an old mattress, let's burn it. And the money is gone. Nothing has ever happened with it. And what is the lesson for this? The lesson is clearly that we need to, first of all, discern what God has given us, put some value to it. And this value is immensely high. It is something, and you can't even pay for it. You can't even pay for it with money. I've just been looking at some mansions here on Earth, and I went to a reservoir, and I went around the reservoir, and it was just like nothing special really. The way I live here in England, in the north of England, I'm not sure whether there are thousands of reservoirs, but sort of in the hills there's the east and the west of the country, and in the middle you've got this, over here you would say a mountain range. If you live in the mountains, because they're not very high, you would probably say just some hills, sort of a lot of hills in the middle of the country. It's like a spine, like a backbone. And in these hills, there are a lot of reservoirs, for fresh water, for the industrial centers here in the north to supply them. There's some reservoir near where I live, and it's used for filling up a canal, for barges which used to move the coal up and down the country. And so you've got these things which are here, and they are very, necessary and useful and so on. And anyway, I went around this lake, and it was nothing special, but somehow it got built up like a resort. So they even had a beach cafe, and I mean the beach was very little, and again the lake was not very big. They had a nice walkway which went all the way around the lake. They got like some meadows and a little bit of agriculture on either side. On some side of the lake there was actually quite a spectacular landscape. You could see from certain points, on the walkway around the lake, and we found out that there were a bunch of mansions. Yeah. There were a few mansions you could see, and they were built on the edge of the lake, and they were prime property, and it's interesting as well. One of the mansion wasn't used at all. Apparently, the couple they worked day and life. It was a doctor and a nurse, and they got the money together, and they wanted to have like a retirement project. Some fancy place, a dream house, a dream mansion where they could live and spend the eve of their lives, the retirement. And they built a house, and there were some problems with the house, and they went to court to go through litigation to get these problems resolved. And then they had an insurance who should pay up to try, and like the roof apparently wasn't quite right, and it needed to be fortified or reinforced. And the whole process lasted about 20 years. So this couple, on the eve of their retirement, waited for 20 years, and they were just in an illegal battle to try and get this done, whilst the house was not lived in and was gradually decaying. But more so, they didn't enjoy these amazing views they were looking forward to, and now because it's so much heartache with the whole thing, they've given up on this. And I want to tell you one thing. This is one example where they have been given something and they've received it in vain. They didn't do anything with it, and in the end they just became bitter about it, because it's never been lived in, it's never been used. Obviously, I thought to myself, the roof, which allegedly wasn't strong enough, couldn't have been that bad, because the house has been pretty much untouched for 20 years and is still standing, still okay. Just to give you some examples of the grace and receiving the grace in vain. And there might be just one example where you've been given something through life, something you can afford, something you can do, and it's ready, you could move in, but there's just like a little flaw, you're not happy with this, and then suddenly this process lasts a very long time, lasts decades. Right. So don't receive your grace in vain, the grace of God in vain, but do something with it. Okay, and it's all very theoretical. What can you do with it? And again, we can go to Corinthians, say there's like a list of all the different gifts you can have. There might be the gift of prophecy, even the ministry of helping people, teaching, encouraging, loving people. My thinking is that it doesn't matter who and what you are. God has got a job for you, and He's got a job for you nobody else in this world can do. And that's just a job for you. And I would encourage you to receive this grace of God in your life, to become a child of God, and then to use this grace God has given you and make the most of it, whilst the sun is rising every morning and setting down in the evening, and just make the most of it. Just make the most of it. Okay, it says here, in an acceptable time I heard you, and in a day of salvation I helped you. Behold, now is the acceptable time. Behold, now is the day of salvation. And it's now. It's always. So it doesn't matter, whether you haven't done anything for the last 20 years, and this is the first time you hear about it, and you think to yourself, what have I done with my salvation? Did I do anything with it? What can I do? Now is the time. Yeah. And my encouragement to you would be, tonight, just lift up your hands, raise up your eyes to the heavens, and say, Lord, I want to give you my life. I ask you, what do you want me to do? What can I do to please you? And in the Bible, it talks about, and talked about it earlier, it talks about the works God has prepared for us in advance. Look out for those works. Look out for those works, and ask God to lead you into those works, give you the strength, the freedom, and everything you need to try and perform those works really well. We are nothing cause of stumbling, and no way so the minister may not be blamed. And now we've got a shift in this text. And I want to go through the shift as well, because Paul talks about himself, and we are back, the Corinthians have got an issue with Paul, because they got some super duper teachers coming in there, some super apostles, and they were kind of stealing the hearts of the Corinthians. And we don't know much about these people. We don't know whether they were wolves in sheep clothing or just ministers who were a little bit off track. We don't know what was going on, whether they were just some narcissistic people who needed self-affirmation of themselves, and the Corinthians were just willing people, and they were just using them to feed their egos. Or they were just greedy people who used them to get money, to press money out of them. Some of this stuff Paul writes on later, and we're going to gradually go to that. It seems to suggest that this is the case, that these guys were just greedy for money, and they got it out of those Corinthians. And Paul talks about it. But anyway, we're going to look at this later. Now, Paul talks about his ministry. And again, when you look at Matthew 24, and I had to think about this today, and I mean, in the past I've spoken out against ministers which I could see were abusing the word of God and weren't right. And this is not because I'm Michael and I know everything. This is because I know a little bit about the Bible, and I could see what these guys were doing and what the Bible says. There are worlds in between. It just wasn't right. It just wasn't right, and yet people were following them blindly, and they were taken as fools, by these people. And it hurts me because they were just exploiting Christians, exploiting the kingdom of God, and that for their own benefit. And it literally hurts me. I've seen this, I've experienced this myself, I've dealt with these people myself, I've been taken as a fool by those people, and I'm seeing other people taken as a fool as well. And Jesus says in Matthew 24, and I was praying about this today, and I thought I was seeking God, and I thought, was I too harsh when I made all these words? And there was one guy, and it's another story as well. It's I'm not going to mention any names, but he had a cult, and he called himself the prophet of the last days. He had a commune, and so he encouraged people to join his commune by selling their houses and everything they had. And then he would give them a trailer. They would move into a little trailer on his property, and they were just turned into slaves, into agricultural slaves, and had to listen to endless sermons he was delivering on a daily basis. The guy was arrested several times for sexual conduct or misconduct, sexual misconduct with minors. I'm not quite sure whether he was convicted. I think he did serve some time in prison, and there was always a bit of a problem. Maybe the witnesses wouldn't speak. I don't know. I don't know the exact details. Anyway, he died recently. And I mean, the way I know him, for near enough 30 years I've been following him on shortwave. So he would have been, I think he was 80... How old was he? 86 or something that he died. And so he would have been in his 50s. This is where I'm now, when he was doing his preaching. And he was just preaching end times. Initially, I thought he was quite okay. And then as time went on, he went more and more extreme. Also in the things he was saying, and I thought he was falling off the deep end. And the scripture Jesus reminded me, or I felt the Lord was reminding me, was in Matthew 24, which says that you will recognize them by their fruit. You will recognize them by their fruit. And he warned us of false prophets, false teachers, and that's in Matthew 24, the warnings about false prophets, false teachers, false messiahs. And again, there's like a whole list which we never had before in the last 150 years, 170 years, where people claim to be Jesus Christ returned, and it obviously they weren't. And then we've got warnings of false teachers, and we've got the encouragement that we will recognize them by their fruit. Again, fruit is not the number of people that come to the Lord, or the size of the ministry or anything like that. Fruit is a character. What is a character like? Are they godlike? Are they like Jesus? And this particular minister, prophet, is he a false prophet? I mean, he's pretty much right in what he's saying, that Jesus is coming back soon, but I think it would be interesting to go through his phrases as well, that he, I'm not sure whether he said that he would return during his lifetime. He was certainly expecting it, seemingly through the way he was speaking, that it was imminent. And again, imminent in God's economy is different to imminence in our economy. But again, I mean, the reminder I got is here, just judging by it, and this is what the Bible tells us. We don't know about people. We don't know about whether they're from God or not, because everybody claims that they speak from God, but we can tell by their fruit. And the fruit would certainly be the character. It would be maybe the message as well to some extent. But they can also have the correct message, but the character is completely lost. And with him, I think he had serious problems. This particular minister, serious problems. And I think some of the things he was doing, they border on, I don't know, on abuse maybe. And again, I studied him quite a lot because I was quite interested. I listened a lot to him, and I just wanted to figure out who he was. And there was actually a whole webpage of people who left the cult and who talked about their experiences and stuff like that. And some of the stuff was quite shocking. So anyway, what am I saying here? There are false teachers around, and this letter is about false teachers. And Paul is pleading with the Corinthians, and he is telling them, look at us. This is us. This is what we are going through. And now I go through this list. And let me just go through this list here as well. He says, we are in nothing giving cause of stumbling. Okay, that's good. In no way so that the ministry may not be blamed. Yeah? So they say they don't cause any offense or anything. They don't try, I mean, they give offense, but as far as the message is concerned, they don't try for anybody to stumble or anybody to fall, but they're trying for everybody to stand up and to not fall in their faith. But in everything, commending ourselves to God's as God's servants, and then he says, in much patience, troubles, emergencies, distresses. Okay, right, that's a lot. Patience. I mean, who has got patience today? People are not taught patience. I mean, to be fair, you're living in an age in the Roman Empire where if you had a news in Rome. And to get to the end of the provinces, it would take days. Yeah, there wasn't any communication system which was fast and efficient. It's not like today where I've got friends all over the world. Friends in Uganda and Russia and Ukraine, in America, in Germany, throughout Europe, and we communicate almost instantaneously. I help a friend of mine who's a pastor in Texas. Yeah. And when there's a problem on a computer, I go in and it's instantly. So it's very, very different when you go back to the Roman days. So this just wasn't possible. You only need to go back even 20, 30 years. And communication across a continent was very, very difficult and very expensive. It was possible, but very expensive. Okay, so we have patience. Patience was a biggie in Roman times. Today, people don't have it anymore. Troubles. Paul had troubles when he was working for the Corinthians. Emergencies, in distresses. He was distressed, and then he goes further, in stripes, imprisonments, riots. Right. All you need to do is read the book of Acts, and you can see what Paul was going through. There were riots because of him. They imprisoned him because of the riots. They were giving him stripes, and they were whipping him. And in one instance, he called on being a Roman citizen, being punished without a court case, which the governor could get in serious trouble for that. In labors and watchings, in fastings, the suggestion is here is that sometimes Paul didn't even have enough to eat. He was not getting any sleep, so he was watching during the night. He was fasting during the night, or during the day as well. And then we've got here in pureness and knowledge and long suffering, in kindness, in the Holy Spirit, in love unfeigned. So that's genuine love. which Paul says, that they were working and dealing, and dealing with the Corinthians in genuine love. He goes further in the word of truth and the power of God through the weapons of righteousness in the right hand and left. So weapons of righteousness, Ephesians 6 is the word of God. That's the sword of righteousness, or the thought of the word of God. And it's a breastplate of righteousness, isn't it? I'm just trying to get it together. It's late at the moment, so my brain doesn't work quite as good as early in the morning. It's just past midnight here. Okay, then he goes on and he says, through glory and dishonor, through evil report and good report, as deceivers yet true. And this you might think, what? Paul as deceivers yet true? To be fair, some people would declare him as being a deceiver, but Paul says, yeah, but we were true, we were truthful. And you find this, the Jews were going after Paul and they were saying, this is a shyster, this is a deceiver, you can't trust him, you need to get rid of him. But he says they were truthful. As unknown and well known as dying, and behold we live. Again, this is not just philosophical words, this is real stuff. In instances, Paul got stoned and he was considered to be dead, and yet he was still alive. As chastened and not killed, again, that's what was happening to Paul very often, that he got whipped, he got chastened, but he didn't get killed. Sorrowful, always rejoicing. And I tell you one thing, and you can see this in this letter, Paul has got sorrow. He's worried about the Corinthians. He loves them. The church exists because of his work and his labor, and somebody else has come in and they wreaked havoc. And he's in sorrow. It's tough. It's tough when you get rejected by people you love. It's difficult. And he has to deal with it, and he still has to find joy, and he still has to rejoice. Is poor and making many rich. Secret of being a Christian, and that's the secret of God's economy. You can be poor, and you can be the richest person in the world. And you can be rich, and you can be the poorest person in the world. This is sort of the way God works. What we consider to be good is not necessarily what God considers to be good. What we consider to be rich is not necessarily what God considers to be rich. I mean, deep down, what we are all longing for is love, peace, satisfaction, security, safety. And all these things are things God will give to you free of charge. And no money can buy it. You can be the richest person in the world, but suddenly you face a whole different set of threats. I mean, I'm relatively poor. Nobody's looking for me for money. I haven't got any, People stealing from me, yeah, some bits, but they won't get rich out of it. Some rich people, they are worried about their riches because a lot of people have placed their eyes on them and they want to get them. As having nothing yet possessing all things. And again, this is God's economy. Some people who have got nothing, they live like they own everything. And to be fair, I mean, I was talking to a friend of mine in Canada once, and we were talking about, the Indian philosophy, the native, in Canada they call them the First Nation, the native people, their philosophy. And he was saying, he was a farmer, and he was saying, look, the way they think, the native people think, and this is where the conflict comes, is we think, how can you own air or water? It's free for all. Air is free for all, water is free for all. How can you own it? And so Indians would pretty much think, how can you own land? Land is for all. It's just given to us all. We need to make the most of it, but you cannot own it. How dare you put a fence on it and keeping us out? Land belongs to everybody. It is our heritage. And I think that is sort of where a little bit of the conflict comes in. But so they say they possess everything. They possess all the land in Canada or in America or wherever it is. And they've got like a different view on things. And I think it's similar as well. God has got a different view. And if you are a child of God, you can possess everything, because ultimately you are a child of the King. And ultimately this creation belongs to God. It's been temporarily handed over to the prince of this world, which is the devil, and that is due to the sin of man. But ultimately we can be rich and we can be possessing everything because our Father in heaven possesses everything. Okay, moving on. O Corinthians, our mouth is open to you and our heart has been enlarged. You are not restrained in us, but you are restrained in your own affections. But for the same reward, I speak as to children, you also be enlarged. Okay, so what Paul is saying is, look, our heart is wide open. Our mouth is open to you, our heart has been enlarged. It's just wide open. And we are not restraining anything. You're not restrained in us. There's no limit to our love to you. And then he says, but your affections are limited. Your affection towards us are limited. And he's trying to encourage them to enlarge their heart as well, and to open up their affections for them. And it's quite a nice thing to say. Paul just doesn't lay into them and say, how stupid are you? Why do you follow these guys? They've turned you astray. They've caused a lot of damage, and woe unto you, because you have abandoned the straight and narrow way, and now you're in trouble, and so on. No, he just says, look, guys, we love you. Our hearts are big. Why are your hearts not as big as ours? Why don't you open them to us and make them big? And that would be great. Okay, I'm going to leave at this point. When we go to the next one, it's also a very interesting story, the whole thing of the unequally yoked with unbelievers. That is 2 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 14. We're going to look at this next time in more detail and what this entails. Very often this scripture is used to discourage marriages between believers and unbelievers, and I can see why. It's just a big problem. Yeah, spiritually you're on completely different levels, and one person is open to God and the other person is completely closed off to God. And how do you produce kids and both together bring up those kids in the fear of God? And it's just a very difficult situation. But I think this scripture goes a lot further. It's not just between marriage partners, but it's between people in this world. You can be yoked together with an unbeliever, and it can be through friendship, it can be through other things as well. And it's a really difficult thing, because I would be the last one to discourage friendship with unbelievers. Very often it's through a friendship that you can communicate the gospel. And I would suggest, to befriend unbelievers, to be there for them, to help them, but at the same time to be firm in your faith. And this is where the yoke comes in. You can be a friend with an unbeliever without being yoked together with them. But you can also be a friend with an unbeliever and you can be yoked together, that there's a common burden you both carry. And again, it's interesting as well, there's some scriptures in the Old Testament, and we're going to pick up on this because we're running out of time here, that you should not yoke a donkey and an ox together. If you've only got two animals and you need to plow a field, and you've got an ox and you've got a donkey, and you haven't got two donkeys or two oxen, it would be, the temptation would be great just to yoke both of them together, but it's unfair. The load is going to be unequally distributed, and it's unfair on one of the animals. And that's a similar thing as well, so with believers and unbelievers. So we have to be wise, clever, good in our understanding. We shouldn't be, just leaving this world or going into a Christian ghetto and just hanging out with other Christians in the Christian ghetto. We should be light in this world. And sometimes the only way we can be light is to be within circles of non-Christians and to be with them, to preach to them through our lives, and they need to be able to look into our lives, not just through a tract or a one-off gospel message or whatever. But it's a very, very difficult thing, and we're gonna explore this next time around. So tune in for the next talk. Thank you for listening. This is Michael here at Seismic Radio, and we are looking at the book of 2 Corinthians.